How on earth did I publish books with a chronic illness and multiple children? I wanted to kind of just share the story with you in case you have been sitting there simmering with a little goal in your heart that you want to achieve. I have an enormous passion for sharing how to make things easier and how to live the life we want to live with chronic illness. And I have always wanted to write a book since I was very small. Like, I remember being very young, like 10, 11, 12, and writing stories in my little room in my house with my four siblings around. And I have always wanted to write, and every now and then I will get this story will come into my head and it will stay in my mind until I've fully formulated it, and then I have to write it down. And I've got several of those tucked away. But the thing is, to write a book, or especially fiction, it's not even just about the writing and the making it up. It's the refining and figuring out plot and characterization and editing. And I just don't have the ability at this phase of my life to spend that long on the computer. Like, it is a very computer intensive thing. But it's a passion, it happens, and I have to do what I can with it. But so in all this time, I never really envisioned that nonfiction would be the genre I published in. Now, I did, so my favorite subject in school was English and media studies. I went to university and I did a double major. I did a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature and Media Studies, and I loved it. It was just the best. And for a little while, I was a bit of a literary snob, and I would only read certain books for a time. But then once I got too sick to read it all, and then started to get a little better and was able to read, I went, what is with these rules? I'm going to read what I want. And so now I read what I want, and I do read a lot of nonfiction. So I guess with my publishing background, it starts with the blog. So 2013, I found myself pregnant kind of suddenly, and my symptoms were not in control beforehand. I had just, like, 1 or 2 years before, moved from a very stressful full-time job with a long commute in a cold city, and I was not doing very well, and I had no good coping mechanisms and no support. And then I moved back in with my parents to a warmer place, took a job with less hours. I worked what I call three-quarter time. So I worked 8:30 to 2:30, and then I would drive home and pick up my two youngest brothers from school, and then I would go home. I'd have a rest on the couch, then I would supervise them doing their homework. We'd take a little walk, and then we'd do dinner. And so it was all very homey and domesticated, but it was enough to help me to kind of get a little further in my journey. But I hadn't yet found the things that really helped me. Hadn't refined the physiotherapy treatments. I did have a physiotherapist, but not one who had the treatment that could help as much as the one now. Didn't have low-dose naltrexone, didn't have recovery factors, did not have yoga nidra, or any of my wonderful yoga stretches I use every day. So suddenly pregnant, symptoms unmanaged, got uncontrollable. Like, they were awful. And in that pregnancy, they were so bad that I went through a whole heap of specialists. They didn't know what to do with me. And I actually found out last year that they diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome at the time, but didn't tell me. Or if they told me, it was completely lost in the noise of, like, my extreme struggle. And so obviously it's pretty bad if you end up diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. I was tired and I hurt. But I started blogging. I created a little blog on WordPress because I wanted to share my experience. First, it was just to literally get it out because no one in my real life understood. I didn't know anyone who had my conditions. I hadn't yet found the Fibro Manual by Geneva Lipton, or From Fatigue to Fantastic by Dr. Teitelbaum. I was flying blind. I had nothing. So I was just sharing my journey. And then I realized I was learning some really important things. And so I was sharing the journey, part to share it, but also part in case, people needed the information. And it's grown since there. But in November of 2017, I think it was, I'd had my second baby. I'm pretty sure. I'll have to actually double check that. My memory is not good. But I remember it specifically. It was either just before Wyatt was born or just after he was born, because I had done 2 pregnancies at that point. And I had quite a lot of content on the blog. So I said, this national, write a novel in a month month, I'm going to get my first book done because I have been slowly writing blog posts this whole time. So what I did is I took all the blog posts I had already written and some things that I had composed but not got into a blog post yet, and then edited it together, added anything in that I thought was missing, and came up with my very first book. This is the very first iteration of any book ever. My brother designed the cover for me, and so along the way I have learnt a lot of things, but he has really developed, and he creates covers and formats books for other people, other published authors as well. So we kind of have done the journey together and learnt together. But this book, as you can see, it's not very big because the thing is that there was not much extra information. So I had my journey, but there wasn't much available online. But I, shared everything I learnt about pregnancy, how I dealt with pain, how I dealt with the second and third trimester, how to nurse with fibromyalgia and my experience, because the main thing with my first son, the main thing I wanted people to know is you're not a failure if you can't nurse. But then by the time I got to my third and fourth, I wanted people to know what I had learned to be successful at nursing. But then I wrote about how to get through the first 6 weeks, important items, managing a toddler, and I did a little bit of a research study. So I sent out a Google Forms survey and asked people questions. So for example, did you find pregnancy made your symptoms worse or better? And 47% said better, 52% said worse. Now, if I'd known more, I might have had a qualifier in there saying, do you have another condition or an autoimmune condition as well? Because I don't think it's as clear cut as 50-50, better or worse. For me, I was definitely worse in pregnancy, especially the first two when I wasn't well managed. But I got it printed, and it was such an amazing feeling to hold it in my hands. But I was a bit shy. I didn't really tell anyone about it. I mean, I had to learn everything involved with everything, right? First you have a blog, and you have to learn how to write a post and then create images to go with the post, and then how to share it and tell people about it and create a newsletter list. And then we were learning about how to do this. But it's obviously small because it's experience. I only had 2 children at this point, and it was literally, like I said, a challenge to myself to get it done. And it was only the second book ever that existed on pregnancy and fibromyalgia. There's one other on Amazon. I got a bit upset because someone read my book and said there's hardly any information in there, and I was like, it's my whole journey, and there is literally no literature, so I don't know what you want me to put in there. But it really dented my confidence, and so I didn't really tell people about it for a while. But eventually I did refine it. So again, slowly as I went, creating blog posts, creating content, and then I came up with the final version, which is a lot more. So this final edition incorporates all 4 pregnancies, and I've got a lot more information. So there's a little bit more literature, a huge list of pain management options, and talking about pelvic pain in pregnancy, because I have noticed that a lot of us with fibromyalgia end up with the worst side of the pelvic pain as well. More information about labor, much more about nursing obviously, and much more about coping in those early years. And I also did a bigger survey which includes actual advice from other fibro parents as well. So that's how I got that one done. So essentially it was many years of work and culminated into a book. Those books was hard, but I did it because of the basic tenets that I follow. So first, you've got to look after yourself. But second, you can do many things if you do it in an accessible manner, if you do it in a paced manner. So if you've got a goal, whether it's to write a book or whatever else, break it down. So take the big goal and say, how can I make this into little chunks? And chunk it out and just get it done. And it's just one foot in front of the other. Like, that's literally all it is. Some days I would put out a blog post and then, some days I would create the blog post. Then I would create the images. Then I would put it into the blog and do the things that you need to do to publish it. And sometimes that I had to break down into steps as well. It all depends on the ability of my neck, because obviously most of my neck energy or capital has to go to my actual work. and living life with the kids. So I have to manage that really well, but then publish it. And then you have to actually tell people about it and share it. And you've got to, do all the other things. So there's a lot to it, but I've broken it down slowly. But I just want to share this with you so that you can see that even amongst all that, you can figure stuff out. Like I literally figured it all out myself, like I created a WordPress blog. I started with a WordPress.com blog, then I figured out how to do self-hosting, then I figured out how to create images in Canva, then I figured out how to create the templates in Canva, then I figured out how you make videos, I figured out how to edit videos. It's all been little bits at a time, and it helps because I love learning. Learning is one of my number one values. Learning and family are my top two. And so it helps because I love to learn. And it also helps because my overall health status has gotten better over the years. But it's all one step at a time. So if I could encourage you in anything, take one step at a time and commit to your goals and plan it in a way that is accessible and flexible. Some days you're just not going to be able to do it. Even if you have your tidy to-do list, you're not going to be able to do it. But you can do it the next time.